Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Govs on the Go Alumni Edition, a new podcast featuring alumni from the College of Arts and Letters here at Austin Peay State University. My name is Dr. Buzz Hoon. I'm the Dean of the college. I'm also the host of the podcast. Today, I'm talking with David Britton, who graduated in 2010. And hopefully I got that right. Is that right, David?
That's correct.
All right, great. Well, welcome to the show. Thank you for being the first guest from the Department of History and Philosophy, and I do appreciate that. It's great to see talk with you. I want to begin with what's going on. Where are you at? Let's give everybody a life update.
Sure. So I am currently the park manager for Dunbar Cave State Park and Port Royal State Historic Park. So those are both in Clarksville and in Adams, Tennessee. Since graduating, I obviously continued with Tennessee State Parks. I was with Tennessee State Parks then, just at a much lower position, and I've slowly made my way up in those ranks. I actually live in Nashville, though. That came because of my previous assignment as a ranger, living in Nashville. And I commute to Clarksville every day. My family's still in Clarksville, so I still have all kinds of Clarksville ties.
Okay.
I'm there every single day.
You do that reverse train, where
yeah.
Here, I'm sure you see all the traffic going the other way.
And I'm so thankful that I'm not on the other side of the interstate when I'm coming up here. But it's not bad. It's about 45-minute commute every day. And most of my life, there comes a point, I think everybody knows that especially if you're a parent, there comes a point where every day is kind of the same thing. So and we're kind of in that phase right now where I've got teenage girls who are getting into their identities and their interests, and one's in marching band and one is in cross country.
Oh, awesome.
And so between that and trying to keep two parks rolling, that kind of consumes majority of my free time. And then beyond that, my partner, she's the director for Historic Castalian Springs over in Sumner County, a couple other historic sites. And so I get voluntold a lot to go and help out with those sites as well. So we stay pretty busy, but we have a lot of fun too. But I would say, that's kind of what's going on now. That's the average day. So,
well, as a newcomer to the area, I think I told you that my wife and I ventured out to Dunbar for the first time, and boy, it was beautiful because right now as the fall kind of is breaking and the trees are changing, and it's just beautiful nature area anyway.
Yes,
that we really enjoyed it. It's beautiful there. And hopefully people have, I'm sure they have if they've grown up in this area, but what a great resource that is.
Absolutely. Dunbar Cave, and this might, get more to what you want to speak about later, but the Dunbar Cave represents a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And it's, it can be challenging as a park manager to kind of know what to do with that. And to know how to shepherd that, and then how to respect that. But no, Dunbar Cave is it's an incredible place, and its meaning continues to evolve. As we learn that there were indigenous people that considered that a sacred space 1,000 years ago, mm-hmm. and today that there are that's the site of where potentially hundreds of African Americans experienced emancipation for the very first time, and so it has a different sacred meaning there, right? But then there's also the ability for a Tennessean to walk out on the trail today after a bad day and be able to process their day and connect to something connect to something bigger, connect to whether it's the outdoors or the stories that are there or whatever. So it's sacred in its own right in that way, and so it's a really remarkable place.
Yeah, it's a living entity. It certainly is.
Absolutely.
So Now that we've cracked a little bit into where you are, let's go backwards. I always like to talk about things that may have influenced you now that you have the wisdom and insight of years of experience. And you mentioned to me that you grew up in Tennessee.
Hmm.
And so I always like to think, do you think that your early life, did you show signs of the love of outdoors, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's uh a lot of people joke about that today, but that's always a kind of a clear delineation, right, between my kids even and myself, is that you usually couldn't get me to come inside. uh uh just being outside was the goal. um no, like I've always had a love of being outside, but my love of the outdoors is very different than maybe a stereotypical love of the outdoors. Well, I don't hunt, I don't fish, I don't camp. But I love being outdoors, and I love appreciating the environment and learning about the environment and the ecologies around me. And it's a little bit of a church for me in that
Yeah.
way. Um, but yeah, so yeah, being as a kid, we spent a lot of time. So the first part of my childhood, we lived over in Gallatin, Tennessee, and we went to Bledsoe Creek State Park very frequently to fish as a kid. Here I say I don't fish as an adult, but as a kid, we did a lot. Uh, I just bank fished and had my first experience with the park ranger at Bledsoe Creek. We found out maybe 5 or 6 years ago at a ranger in service, and the director of parks, currently still the current director of state parks, was asking rangers to talk about their first experience with the park rangers in order to be mindful of that to the public, right? And so I start telling my story of Bledsoe Creek State Park and how I was probably first grade, something thereabouts, second grade, and participating in a hug a tree program, which is what do you do when you get lost in the woods? You hug a tree, right? And so he said, wait a minute, what year was this? I was like, it's sometime in the late 1980s. And he goes, well, that had to be me. I was the only park ranger there from 1985 until 1992. And so we talked about it, and it's like, sure enough, my very first experience with the park ranger is our current director uh,
Wow.
in the park system. And so I don't know that ever being a park ranger was the in the sites. I think initially as a kid I wanted to be an archaeologist, which is also an outdoor gig,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And that kind of that was probably the driving one until I became a teenager and got into playing music and stuff like that. Uh, uh, yeah, so yeah, we spent a lot of time outside. We would go to historic sites. My mother worked for Mansker Station, historic area there in Gilletsville, Tennessee, and so she dressed up and was a docent and interpreter for the site for many years there, and so had a lot of my after school days were filled with that,
Hmm.
and hanging outside of an 18th century fort, uh, and then going to events like that on the weekends. Probably to my chagrin, stopping at historical markers on the highway and taking the long and windy ways to get somewhere in order to go by XYZ historic space. And of course, that's exactly what I do today
Yeah.
with my kids. Uh, but yeah, all that played a pretty significant role
Okay.
in
And you
becoming.
mentioned when you were growing up too, you were homeschooled.
Mhm.
And your, as you said, your parents would take you to historic sites,
Yeah,
and so and it just as a young, as you become a young adult, as you had mentioned, maybe being a park ranger was not on the radar, but at some point you probably had a thought to yourself of, what am I going to do when I become an adult?
well, sure. Yeah, I think I was probably more preoccupied with that question than a lot of kids were for some reason. The we partner and I joke a lot but like when I was a kid, like I wanted to be an adult. Like I was ready to go ahead and like I want to pay bills. So I want to work a 9 to 5. I want to get to it, which is funny. My youngest daughter seems to be the same way. She's ready to get at it. But sorry, I lost my train of thought. You're gonna have to repeat
That's right. So were you working part-time jobs and
Yeah.
kind of getting that experience? And did you think to yourself, I'm just gonna, what kind of career were you think you headed to before you got to college?
Yeah. So, okay. So, as let's say a teenager, as a
Yeah.
young person, I was pretty certain I wanted to be a professional guitar player. And I pursued that pretty, diligently,
Yeah.
and then I will say that that's probably something my folks instilled in me, is that doesn't matter what you're going to do, right? Whatever you do, be your best at it, and put your all into it. And so that's probably something that I carry with me in all of this. And so yeah, I
Well,
wanted to
David,
be
you have to mention what kind of music you were interested in playing now.
of course, rock music, right?
Okay.
But and I still play guitar today, and I haven't played out in a long time, but I enjoy it. But that preoccupied a lot of my teen years. But about the time I turned I don't know, probably 18 or so, I, for whatever reason, began to get to know my grandmother more. And so my dad had grown up in Port Royal. My grandparents owned a farm, small farm, like 20 acres, that adjoined the south side of the park and the west side of the park. And so I'd always, been connected to Port Royal through that, and gone to the park when I was going to my grandparents and that kind of thing. And but I remember one time being sometime in my late teens, and we were outside working in the yard, and she said, "Well, there used to be a whole town here." And I was like, "What?" And so she starts telling me the story of Port Royal, and for whatever reason, that kind of was the fish hook in me. And it kind of began what's now been a lifelong, passion toward these kinds of places, and the study of history, and the practice and profession of it. And so yeah, that became a bonding point for my grandmother and I, but then also became, I think, further bonding, between my folks and I, because he's finally into history,
Yeah.
But even today, that's kind of like my father works at a historic site at historic Collinsville, on the south side of the county, and so that's whenever we talk, it's usually like shop talk, like, so what are you doing about X, Y, and Z, and tell me about this. And so, but yeah, that was kind of the if you get younger, of course, there's plenty of crazy ideas about what you want to be when you grow up. But yeah, I've always been, I would say, since the end of my teens, been pretty certain that I wanted to be involved in history in some capacity. But it's not a straight line. I'm not a straight line kind of person.
Right, and that's okay. I mean, I think that people need to know that's people can find their ways in, and will have different paths along the way.
Absolutely. And so for myself, I've always been the I don't know. I guess I've always never felt inclined to do the easy way, and for better and worse. But I think for my case, it's always been better, because I went to school to college for the first time when I was 18, and I flunked out hard. I was staying up too late. I wasn't like a bad kid or nothing like that, but like I didn't want to be there, and so I remember I made through my first semester with like B's. Okay. Made it through my second semester with like a B and a bunch of FAs. And I was like, all right, this isn't for me. I'm gonna we're gonna tour. I'm gonna be a musician. I'm gonna do whatever else. And of course, in reality, what that wound up being is I began working construction. Nothing wrong with working construction. We need people working construction. But I was working unskilled construction, and had not, was not moving towards a particular trade or a skill set in that. And it's hard. It's hard work, and unfortunately, a lot of times, for unskilled stuff, it doesn't pay very well. And not too soon after that, I was kind of down in the dumps about it, and then I've discovered a job that I liked a lot, working for a guitar manufacturer in Nashville, Gibson Guitar. And so worked for them for a few years, and enjoyed that, but then realized one day, it's like, I haven't seen the sunlight. I remember it was one particular winter where you're going into work at like 5:36 in the morning, and you're doing mandatory overtime, so you're not getting out of the building until like after 6. And I was like, I haven't seen the sunlight in 6 weeks. I feel like a vampire. And because there's no windows in the place, it's just a giant factory, other than the occasional skylight that you run to out of starvation. But so about that time, I had become interested in participating in the Friends group at Port Royal State Park. And so I will always sing the virtues of having Friends groups at parks, because for those who don't know, a Friends group is a group of interested private citizens who are assisting and supplementing some sort of entity, in this case Dunbar Cave State Park or Port Royal State Park or whatever. They're usually a 501c3 nonprofit. And so the park had reopened after a stint being closed for some time, and I was interested in wanting to see this park succeed. And so I became restarted that Friends group, became the Friends president, became the president of the Friends group for a little while. And I remember during a particular meeting at Port Royal, this would have been like 2005 maybe, and I was speaking with the then park manager and then the current park manager from Pinson Mountain State Park, and who had began his career there as well. And they both said, you know what, you'd make a good park ranger. And I was like, never even thought of that before, you know. And so again, thinking about it more and more. And at the time, I did not have a degree, and it required a degree. And so I talked to the park manager, Bob Wells. If anybody's been in Clarksville any amount of time, you would know Bob. But and kind of told him what I was thinking, and he said, well, I can't pay you much. I have an open maintenance position that I can put you in, and it's full time. And I thought about it and talked to my then wife about it, and made the decision to leave the guitar manufacturing world and come to the wonderful world of cutting grass in Tennessee state parks. But I loved it because I'll tell you why. It's because from day one, I have felt like I have a mission.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm very mission driven, personally, professionally, and I felt like what I was doing counted towards something. And for me, that was and is it's almost like a drug. It's like to feel like what you're doing counts for something.
Yeah.
Nobody may know your name 100 years from now, but the effects of what you're doing is going to be felt. And so I re-enrolled in college at the same time, and of course this time in college I did great. I think the lowest grade I ever made, I made all A's all the way across the board except one class, and I'll call this name out, Cameron Sutt. gave me a C. We're friends, so I can say that to him. But I deserved every bit of that C too. But it was a bad paper. But no, otherwise I did really, really well in that department. And the history department at Austin P, not to be speaking hyperbole or to be dramatic, it literally did change my life. You know, it just on the surface, it gave me the professional tools to succeed, right? As a historian, I had the added benefit of being in a job where I could see the immediate application of what I was doing, right? Because, getting a history degree, right? A lot of people are like, oh, you want fries with that? That's what kind of job are you going to get with that? Or a lot of people think they're going to get a history degree because it's an easy degree. And if you want to get through with a D average, it's an easy degree. But a lot of degrees are, if that's the case. History teaches you to be a critical thinker, first and foremost. And Lord knows we need more of that. We need critical thinkers. Critical thinkers are what pushes the world forward. They're what shifts the paradigm. They're what helps us let go of needless things. Having that immediate application really helped me. And I was very fortunate to have professors that were patient with me, because I could I still am, but could be overexcited about stuff. And
I'm sure they love that though, David. I'm sure I know I would.
I hope so. I think they did, and I've developed lifelong relationships with these people, then it's one of the neat things about being at a smaller, Austin Peay's not really small anymore. I can't really say it's small anymore, but it's smaller in comparison to some other schools. But it was one of the benefits of being in that smaller department, is that I got to know these professors. They're people I consider dear to me today. And so, Dr. Richard Gildry, he retired, I think about the time I hit my junior year there. And gosh, that guy, even today, he is such an immense mentor. I still talk to him monthly, whether it's a text or a phone call, or working with him on a project, or getting him to help me edit a paper that I'm submitting to something or whatever. And but he was one of those a great example of a well-worn and tried and true professional who knew his craft, who is nationally recognized, but wanted to stay in Clarksville because he knew he could do better in Clarksville. He knew he could change more, and he recognized my love and passion for it, and took me to task with it. And same thing with Christopher Ray. He was there for a few years. They made the point to grade my stuff harder, by request, to help me develop papers into journal articles, at an undergraduate level, and to present at professional conferences. Manoa Uffelman is still there, an extreme cheerleader, for any student there, but just a constant source of encouragement, to don't stop here, go there, go to this next level, go to this next level, go to this next level. And so, I could really say, Cameron Sutt, I wasn't in his particular wheelhouse as far as study area, but he became a great friend and source of inspiration, and along the way. So if they're all listening, if they all listen at some point, thank you for what you did. I know I'm not the only student that you affected positively. My best friend, Michael Ramsey, he's currently at the Costume Design Center for Colonial Williamsburg, and he started at Austin P same year I did. Dr. Gildry was the one that recognized we would be good friends, and he was like, "Y'all should be friends." We're okay, so we became friends. But he would say these same things about these same professors and other professors that he had. That it was a life and perspective changing experience. When I got out of Austin P, again, not following a straight path, I initially intended to go straight to grad school. Life had other plans. But even now, it's like, you don't want to, like, at the risk of sounding pompous, you find yourself being like, man, we're a little more advanced than a lot of these other people the colleagues in these other programs, or those other people I'm running into along the way, so yeah, thank you, Austin P.
Well, and not only do they foster those kind of relationships, which I mean, one of the purposes of this podcast is to make sure that people understand that this is the benefit of a smaller program and a quality program like we have in history. But you have also reciprocated. You come back.
Yes, absolutely.
And they've told me that you come back and you share that story with other students, and that helps them understand the skills that they are putting into their tool belt, that when they take out into the world. You saw the direct connection, which I'm so grateful for. And many people, don't see that until as they get older, and maybe it was because you came back and you were a non-traditional student, but that I hope people understand the great value of the education that they're going to get here.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's coming back there is it's always a joy for me. And gosh, the campus is like, it developed so rapidly that when I came back as park manager at Dunbar Cave, I came back on campus for the first time, not in that long, a couple of years, and I was like, man, I don't even recognize this place. But it's always a joy. So whether it's giving talks, or I've done Dr. Uffelman's Tennessee history course a couple of times, giving a guest lecture for that, or coming and talking to the history club or Phi Alpha Theta or whatever. I think it's important, and I think this would be beyond history, but it's important that people, especially young people in school, can see what this degree can do. Yeah. I'm not just, my limit, or my options aren't limited to just being in pre-law or an accountant with a history degree. I mean, it's like, there's a lot more you can do, guys, and plus, every job market is saturated, maybe with the exception of like medical and stuff like that. But like public history, which is what I specifically do, there's always a need for people. Excuse me. There's always a need for folks that are willing to get down in the trenches and see the good work that public history can do. But no, so I'm always ecstatic to come back to Austin P and share anything with students there.
Well, let's talk a little bit as your job as a park ranger too.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the responsibilities that you have, and how's your job changed over the years?
Sure. So I would say it's changed a lot over the years, because when I came into it, I was literally just cutting grass and patching fences and fixing sinks and that kind of thing. And today I manage a staff that reaches about 12 or 13 people in the summertime. We have, between both parks, we have a combined budget of around $700,000, and which, yeah, I know to like some folks is not a lot, but for the public sphere, this is not bad. But and of course, the duties of the park ranger are innumerable, really. So I did after I was a maintenance person at Port Royal and Dunbar Cave. I became a law enforcement park ranger at Bicentennial Capitol Mall State Park in downtown Nashville. So I spent several years there, gaining a lot of great experience. We wind up, unfortunately, acting in a more of a strict law enforcement capacity there than you would in other parks. But it was a good thing coming straight out of the police academy to have real world experience, and plus it was also experience with people that need to be shown grace more often than enforcement, and so I cherish that experience a lot. I'll never look at homeless people the same, because of my experience there. So yeah, after my time there, I was promoted to park manager and came back up here to Clarksville. Now a park ranger, I mentioned the multitude of hats. So there's three things primarily that we're responsible for, but on any job application you'll see the asterisk that says "and other duties as required." So those three things are going to be law enforcement. You have to be a state certified law enforcement officer. You got to go to the Tennessee State Police Academy. Then you've the other area is resource management. So that is preserving, protecting, and making decisions about these resources, cultural and natural resources on a park. So Dunbar Cave, that's the cave itself, right? That's the prairie that we just restored. That's the trail, which is kind of a little mix between a natural and cultural resource. They're physical buildings at Port Royal, the Trail of Tears. I mean, so you have to make decisions about how we manage these things to ensure that they are here in perpetuity and that they are managed in accordance to professional convention and standard. The third part of that is interpretation, and the interpretation is probably the most important part, because an interpretation is the process through which the park ranger relates these resources to the public. How do we make you care about them, right? Because
that's storytelling,
it's how do I connect you to this resource in a way that makes you feel compelled to participate in the protection of this resource yourself, whether that's physically or financially or however. And that can be one of the more rewarding processes, I think, as a park ranger, is being the liaison between the public and these resources, because folks frankly don't get a great education in the outdoors. They don't get a great education about history. They really don't get a great education about the world around them, the natural world around them, and better ways to relate to that as a citizen and as a human. And being a park ranger can help you being a park ranger, I guess, it presents these really special opportunities, to be that person that is making those ends meet, those connections for the first time for somebody, or it maybe for the 15,000th time with somebody, right? Because so there's a guy, a bit of a philosopher in interpretation, darn near 100 years ago now, named Freeman Tilden, and he was kind of the first to suggest that if we can make somebody care about this resource, then they're going to be the protectors, because so you are to an extent evangelizing for your these resources and bringing people on board along the way. so that it eventually becomes a community effort to ensure these places are preserved and protected. And of course, a lot of that's also like, understanding like how does preserving a 300-yard long section of the Trail of Tears make your life better? Well, I mean, that can be it could be a little bit of a stretch maybe for some people to think about that. But then we think about, well, I think part of existing in this world requires empathy.
Mhm.
And I think that part of being a good human requires empathy. And when you are able to stand in a place where one of the greatest human rights violations in the history of the United States took place, and be able to not just connect through the storytelling, but physically connect with the ground that these people touched, it enables the average visitor to connect with something that they normally are never ever going to get to connect with. And so not only does it like, okay, yeah, here's a beautiful space or a solemn space or a place I can go to reflect, it can change their lives. It can change the way that they approach the relationships with people in their lives. They become better citizens, right? Whenever we talk about principles of a democratic nation, right? One of the things that comes up is being a well-informed citizen. Well, being a well-informed citizen requires us to understand and contextualize who we are with the world before us, and hopefully we have a better compass for the world ahead of us, right? And those are the kind of the grandiose versions of what a simple interpretation moment with a 10-year-old about Indian removal, or maybe a little more mundane about a handful of mussel shells on the bank of a creek. Having that moment can lead them to being better citizens, whether that's through relationships with people or relationships with the world around them. So go ahead. I don't know if
Yeah, I was just going to mention that it does seem like what you're doing is also making that connection for somebody that can last an entire lifetime. I mean, as you mentioned, somebody can come there as a child and have that first experience and then continue to come back or be in that environment for their entire lifetime and return and continue to so you're helping to make that relationship with that physical environment, but also, as you said, talk about the history of that, which makes them connect with people over a period of time.
Absolutely.
The way you explain that, it just is wonderful.
Well, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to have this moment of interpretation with you. So yeah, a park ranger's duties can vary. All three of these different areas happening in the same single day can make for interesting days. Knock on wood. Fortunately, we don't have a law enforcement issue at either Port Royal or Dunbar Cave. You get this park rules stuff for the most part. Keep your dog on a leash. Pick up your trash. And you get the occasional kid smoking dope and stuff like that, and you address that. But for the most part, our jobs are very focused on resource protection and interpretation. So we're go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry.
I didn't.
Another noise is here. So we're very fortunate in that our ranger staff between both parks are very capable, and I've got them divided out in such a way that enables all of these needs to be met. So I have one ranger, a park ranger 3 named John, who's pretty much in charge of all law enforcement efforts at both parks. And so he takes care of, monitoring everything from like doing the reports and monitoring cameras and maintaining relationships with outside agencies and all the kind of boring law enforcement stuff. Like he takes care of that, ensures that the other rangers are meeting their training requirements and stuff like that, and myself. And then, but the other two rangers are more. We'll have one at Dunbar and one at Port Royal, and each are very adept at interpretation and very adept at resource management. And they've got their respective projects at both places, that they work with. And so when you go to these places, those are the rangers that you'll more than likely encounter. You'll see Bobby at Port Royal, you'll see Adam at Dunbar Cave, and then in the summertime you'll see the whole army of seasonal, which you can be if you are a history student and you're at least a junior, and you want to, and not just history, but if you're a college student, let's say that, at least a junior, and want to work in Tennessee State Parks, that's a great way to try it out. Is come work for me or some other park in the summer as a seasonal interpretive ranger or a seasonal interpretive recreator at some of the other parks, and kind of feel it out. So we rely a lot on college students to make the summer cave tour season work at Dunbar Cave. But so as far as the way things have changed, a lot of it is just purely reflective, like I mentioned earlier, of just the change in position. So when you're a maintenance person, you don't have to worry about interpretation or maintenance, even though I did a lot of interpretation, and certainly didn't do any law enforcement. But then become a ranger, you don't have to worry about managing people. But then when you become a park manager, you get to do all of it. So that's been probably my biggest challenge. Is just how do I be a good park manager? What does that look like? Because like any profession, there's always going to be the like, oh, I don't want to be like that guy, or whatever, and there's plenty of griping, in the field about what, constitutes a good or a bad park manager.
Right.
But for me, what I have kind of honed in on, and hopefully I'm going in the right direction with it, is delegation, is giving my employees the power to make the decisions inside of the world that they're responsible for, and then backing them up on it. And then if they make a bad decision, don't take away that responsibility, just to have corrective conversation and then move on, but be sure they've got the tools, be sure they've got the training, and be sure they've got the emotional and moral support to do those things. And that's kind of where I work now. It's like I can't have my hands in everything. I would love to have my hands in everything, because I'm very much keep my sleeves are rolled up. So roll up your sleeves and get in it.
Right. Well, you started at the bottom and you worked your way up. It's hard not to, want to stay involved in those areas.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I love being dirty. So the idea of sitting behind a desk is torture. So I do everything I can to get out in it. And hopefully the other Rangers appreciate that. So we'll see.
Well, David, it's been such a great conversation talking about this, but I always like to end with sort of the recommendations you might have for a student like yourself that you've already talked about the value of a degree in history, but what kind of recommendations might you have for a young person in college today?
Well, let's tail off of something we were talking about earlier, that my life has not been a straight line, and it's okay if yours isn't either. I think that especially younger people, I won't say younger people, say anybody, I think they need the encouragement to know that it's okay to not know what you want to do when you're 18 years old. It's okay to not know have I spent the last 3 years in college pursuing the right thing,
Right.
and it's okay to question, once you got out of school, did I get the right degree? Those are all valid questions, and it's okay to have them. But on top of that, I would say be brave. It's so hard, especially like now as a parent of children who are on the verge of going to college, that you want them to pick things that might be a little safer, or something that has proven track record. But at the same time, it's like, if your passion is in something, follow that, because there's too many people that don't follow their passions, and I think live to regret it. but be brave. Try stuff that you've never tried. You know, be willing to take calculated risks, because the world's too small and the life's too short to be safe all the time. So,
Amen.
so yeah,
Great.
and of course,
Go ahead.
and of course, go ahead. Like if you're for those interested in specifically preservation, interpretation, parks, come and see me. You know, I'm here in Clarksville. Swing by Dunbar Cave. If I'm not there, just leave your number and I'll holler at you.
What a great resource. And we thank you not only for the conversation, but also how you stay connected to the department and to our students. We're very thankful for that.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. I really enjoyed it. And I appreciate the world that Austin Peay has afforded me. So.
And thanks to all of our weekly viewers and listeners out there for checking out the podcast. We hope that you will join us again next week as we continue to profile some of the outstanding alumni we have here in the College of Arts and Letters at Austin Peay State University. So until next time, stay safe, take care, and God bless.